do we have manuscripts that go back very close to Jesus and the apostles?
Yeah, I think what we need to say is Bart gives this image that we don't have manuscripts almost for hundreds of years at all. And at one place when he was on a TV or a radio show, he actually said that, but he knows that that's not the case. I'm not so sure he can say we don't have copies of copies of copies of copies. We don't know how many generations there are between the copies we do have and the original. But this we do know. We have in the 2nd century between 10 and 15 manuscript copies. All of them are fragmentary. They're all papyri, but they're all from the New Testament. That's absolutely unheard of for any other Greco-Roman literature. You don't have any other ancient Greco-Roman literature that has copies that come within decades of the original documents, and yet people are saying, we can't possibly know what the original New Testament said. If that's true about the New Testament, it's 100 times more true of all these other ancient documents.
As one person said, if you're going to throw out the New Testament documents on that basis, you have to can all of history, period, ancient history.
As far as the manuscript evidence is concerned, absolutely.
Yeah. All right, tell me about this evidence and how full it is.
Well, let me address the question of this copies of copies, if I may. The imagery that Bart is trying to present with this, I think, is an imagery that we all are familiar with. It's the telephone game that we all played as kids. And the whole point of the telephone game is you whisper something in somebody's ear, it goes down 9 or 10 people until you get to the last one, and he garbles the whole story, everybody laughs. The whole point of the game is to see if it can get garbled badly. So it's not necessarily a coherent message to begin with. And there's this sense of we don't have copies of copies of copies of copies until we get to this point. There's the sense of this single line of transmission.
The telephone game.
Like the telephone game. But there's a lot of problems with using that analogy, whether Ehrman uses it explicitly or implicitly. First of all, we're dealing with written documents. We're not dealing with oral tradition in a parlor game.
In other words, if you ask the guy, listen, instead of conveying that orally, just tell me, you're saying write the message down and give it to me.
Exactly. Yeah. So if you've got a document like the Gospel of John written down and the next guy is supposed to write it down, is he going to garble it as much as the guy who's hearing these words? That's not likely. Secondly, you have multiple lines of transmission. It's not just original person going through a single line. Now you've got 3 or 4 lines going out.
Because the Gospel of John would be written, say, 3, 4, 5, 6 times from one manuscript going out to different parts of the empire.
Mm-hmm. And so you've got these lines of transmission from these original documents. Now if you compare just the last person in each one of those lines with their documents and compare them to each other, we'd have a far better sense of what that original document actually said. But thirdly, you do have not just the last person that we have to consult. We can consult several of the intermediate agents getting back much closer to the original. So if I say I'm going to pick number 3 guy in this line and number 4 guy in this line and number 6 guy in this line out of 300 guys, now we're getting very, very close to the original. We can make those comparisons. And finally, that original document would have been copied far more than just one time. So again, it's not just one line of transmission, but it's several lines, maybe even 10 or 20 lines where this document is being copied, and then those develop their own streams of transmission. When you see it in that light, it tells us that, oh, that is so different from the telephone game and so different from the impression that I'm getting from reading Misquoting Jesus, that I think what we have here is something that tells us what the original text said.